There are over 2,000 verses that reference riches, money, wealth, variations of that. So, no, I don't have them listed out, so I can't send them to you. But that's according to Crown Financial, which is Larry Burkett's old company, old corporation. So who would like to read verses 1 through 6 to get us started?
Now listen, you rich people. Weep, wail, because of the misery that's coming on you. Your wealth is rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourself on the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who is not opposing you.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. So as we go through here, for you listeners or people who've never been in one of my classes, I'll read a section, then we'll stop and talk about it if you have any questions. So I do have some breaks built in, so it's not just a strict lecture. Sometimes God chooses to bless certain believers with great riches. Money is neither good nor evil. It is neutral and can be used for good or evil. However, the desire to get rich will ensnare those who have it. Love and money is the root of all evil. We're familiar with that verse in 1 Timothy 6. A popular comedian once said, if money talks, all it ever says to me is goodbye. But money was not saying goodbye to the men James addressed in this section of his letter. These men were rich and were using their wealth for selfish purposes and were persecuting the poor in the process. The rich thought they had it made because of their wealth, but God thought otherwise. James describes the rich as greedy and selfish, loving their money and mistreating others. They were selfish to get more money, and once they had it, they used it on themselves, satisfying their own passions instead of to glorify God. James did not say it was a sin to be rich, but he is concerned about their selfishness and describes the consequences of misusing riches. There's a right way and a wrong way to get money. There's a right way and a wrong way to use money. Any questions or comments on the opening? The first 3 verses of this section, James gives several warnings to the rich. James begins by warning that the riches will vanish. That's in verses 2 and the first part of 3. Grain will rot, gold will rust, and garments will become moth-eaten. Nothing material in this world will last forever. Death and decay are found in all of the creation. It is a great mistake to think there's security in wealth. Paul wrote, instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited, nor to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches. Again, that's 1 Timothy 6:17. Riches are uncertain. Even if you manage to get through your whole life and hold on to your money, you can't take it with you. What is it? There's no U-Haul trailers behind a hearse or something like that. Any comments?
At least we finally have a saying that money can't buy happiness.
Yeah.
It took a long time, I think, to get that.
Some people still think you can, but James also warns that misused riches erode character in verse 3. Their corrosion will eat your flesh like fire, verse 3. This is a present judgment. The poison of wealth has infected them, and they are being eaten alive. Riches tend to make people self-reliant and prideful. Though itself, money is not sinful, but of course the love of money is the root of all evil. Thou shalt not covet is the last of the 10 commandments, but is the most dangerousness because covetousness will make a person break all the other 9 commandments. And you remember back in 2017, we talked about that a little more in depth when we talked about the 10 commandments. Y'all do remember that class, right?
Yes.
Never will
You
forget.
don't. You weren't here. I ended up teaching that class 3 times. For the senior adults, for the young adults, and then for the teenagers. So you asked about 10 commandments. I know the 10 commandments. Okay, Jim?
Thought there were just 2. Now,
There is now.
It's easier.
It's
What's
easier.
your favorite?
The
My
first one.
favorite?
Yeah. The two.
Yeah, the two.
I like the one that says rest on the Sabbath, that's my favorite.
Oh, is that your? That doesn't mean what we think it means too, by the way.
Well, it doesn't really say rest on the Sabbath, it says remember the Sabbath.
Yeah,
Keep it
keep it holy, yeah.
It just says do no work.
No, that's.
No, it doesn't say that, but we're digressing here, we're digressing. So what have the rich, about whom James is talking, done in the last days, which will testify against them? Verse 3,
Cheated.
cheated. Anybody else have a different translation? Different word?
Hoarded.
What is it? Anybody have NIV?
Hoarded.
Yeah, NIV says hoarded.
Yep.
The rich have hoarded their treasure. Abraham, Job, Solomon, and many others were wealthy, but they maintained their faith and character. It's good to have riches in your hand, provided they do not get into your heart. If riches increase, set not your heart upon them, in Psalm 62:10. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and love and favor rather than silver and gold, Proverbs 22:1. If God gives them to you, thank Him, and then generously use them for His service. Anything else? Any questions or comments about the eroding character? We're moving right along. Finally, judgment is a certainty, verses 3 and 5. On that day of judgment, the rich men's wealth will witness against them. Their rotten grain, rusted gold and silver, and moth-eaten garments will bear witness of the selfishness of their hearts. Think of the good that could have been accomplished with that hoarded wealth. The wages they held back will cry out to God for justice and judgment. Is there anything sinful about saving? No. The answer is no. But instead of laying up treasures in heaven by using their wealth for God's glory, they were selfishly guarding it for their own security and pleasure. What happened to Jerusalem within 10 years after James wrote this letter? Anybody know?
Destruction.
Yeah. It fell. Jesus fell to the Romans, and all this accumulated wealth was taken. So what did Jesus mean by laying up treasures in heaven? Did he mean we should sell everything and give it to the poor, as he instructed the rich young ruler? I don't think so. He spoke that way to the rich young ruler because covetousness was the young man's sin, and Jesus wanted to expose it. To lay up treasures in heaven means to use all that we have as stewards of God's wealth. You and I may possess many things, but we do not own them. God is the owner of everything, and we are His stewards. Susan and I was listening to a preacher on TV this morning as we were getting ready, and his reference was 2 Kings chapter 6. That's where the guy borrows an axe. He's out chopping down a tree. The axe handle falls into a river, and he gets all excited. Anybody remember the story?
Yeah.
Elijah raised it.
Yeah, Elijah raises it up, but in the meantime, he gets all excited because that axe was borrowed, and now he's broken the axe, so he's afraid he's going to be punished for breaking the axe. And like Deborah says, the end of the story is Elisha raises the axe head, Elisha raises the axe head out of the water so he can get it and fix the axe handle. But I thought of, as I'm listening to that sermon this morning on TV, I'm thinking, here's a good fit. This is the same situation. We don't own anything. Everything we have it belongs to God, and we're just stewards of it. So it does help sometimes to listen to TV preachers if you take bits and pieces and can use them. So. When we yield to His will and use what He gives us to serve Him, then things become treasures, and we are invested in eternity. The Bible does not discourage savings and even investing, but it does condemn hoarding. Anybody have any questions or comments about the judgment with hoarding or riches?
Can you talk about the difference between saving and hoarding? When does one become the other?
I'm not a good example to answer that question because Susan may give you a different answer than I give. I look at hoarding as spending money that you don't, spending money you can't afford to spend on things that you probably won't ever use. Vaughn, you have an answer? You have your hand up.
An answer to that question?
Yeah.
I will, and then I'll go to.
Okay.
Well, the example Jesus used was the rich man who said, I'm going to lay up several treasures for myself and take it easy and have a good life.
Right.
He was hoarding.
Yeah.
And he said that God called him a fool.
Yeah.
So that attitude, basically, I'm just going to hoard everything and have a great life for myself. I think God would refer to that as a foolish thing to do.
And we tear down small barns to build big barns.
Right. I think that's probably Jesus' example.
Yeah.
Hoarding.
Now, then you get into a thing, well, maybe, there's a situation where a barn has become too small for a growing family, and there are legitimate reasons for tearing down barns, but it backs up to what he said, and I think it was overlooked, is what's in his heart.
Yeah, it's hard.
And that is
hard, the key.
all too familiar, the theme of.
And that's the theme through these first 6 verses.
Well, it's the theme through the New Testament.
Yeah.
Through the New Covenant.
You have another comment?
I did actually.
One more to that, though.
Okay.
The difference to me is your unwillingness to share.
Yeah.
And I think when you reach a point that you can't share, that's an issue.
Yeah, that is an issue. Juan, go ahead.
You mentioned the saying, you can't take it with you. And I think kind of Jesus is saying you can take it with you if you invest it wisely.
Yes.
And essentially, if you're giving to those in need, you're laying up for yourself treasures in heaven.
Yeah.
So essentially, you can take it with you. So you're investing it wisely.
Yeah.
So that should be a part of an investment plan, huh?
There you go.
Exactly, sure. If you ask Jesus, I think that's what he would tell you.
Part of the pie.
All the investment professionals are saying that, being Gary and his kind.
Do what?
Because Gary is an investment professional, he's telling you where to invest your spirit.
Oh, yeah.
So, you can trust the wrong investment. We all know you can trust the wrong investment professional.
And I've even heard it said, and some of us in our Thursday night home group has heard this before. Our investment for our 70, 80 roughly years on earth is going to pay off tremendously in heaven if we use our investment wisely here. And I'm not talking about money investment, I'm talking about our time and spirituality investment. Yeah. Juan, you got it.
I think it applies to money too.
Yeah.
Get your time.
Yeah, you know what to do with your money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
And again, I think Jesus says that point blank.
yeah.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't shy away from that, I don't think. Because it's equal, I think, in terms of your time, your effort, your attention, your money. All of that's taught.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Growing up, I was sort of scared of the verse what we referred to earlier about the rich entering heaven, how difficult it's going to be for the rich to enter into heaven. So, well, I don't want to be rich. But of course, then as I got older, I realized what the word rich means and look at it a little bit differently.
John, you talk about investment, and I've heard it said a bunch of times, could be mother or father, whichever one, that's working a lot, not spending time with the family.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times, if that's your focus and energy is focused on acquiring money, but once they get older, realize, I've not spent any time with my family.
Yeah.
So they are poor in that aspect.
Right.
I mean,
And
have the dollars.
many families is broken up because the dad is at work 80 hours, 100 hours a week or whatever.
Yeah.
I guess we can make that work.
Dave Ramsey talks about that, okay, are you going to spend all your time making money, or are you going to spend the time you can with your kids? And his, he says, I worked a lot, but you know what? I was with my kids every time I could be. And he's sitting there talking with his daughter, who is now grown, and she's.
Who works for him.
Who works for him.
Yeah, she's
But
on
you know what?
staff
The
now.
funny thing about her comment is that was always around. And Dave Ramsey's perspective is, I worked 80 hours a week. But I was there at times. I didn't abandon the family. And, it's all about perspective. And we think as adults, well, I need to work from home and be there 24/7 for my kids. And believe me, me and Jennifer have both done that. When we were doing foster care, I was home practically 24/7.
Yeah.
She eventually was home a lot more because we were both working from home, but we never felt that was required.
Yeah.
And
You have to find that balance.
yeah, there is a balance,
You have to find the
most
balance,
definitely.
Yeah. And one of the worst working groups is preachers, who get called out at all hours of the day and night and gone and whatever, doing all their preacher stuff. I don't know what y'all do except one day a week. So
One day a week, that's it, man.
Yeah,
Just
Great
one.
gig, man, great gig.
Talking about this, I think of the song, remember back in the 80s, song Cats in the Cradle?
Yeah.
Remember that? And that whole song is about the man working while his kids are small, he works all the time. Then he gets to the point and says, wait a minute, kids already grown and out of the house, and I haven't spent any time with my child. So that's the whole premise of that song. Anybody else? Ron?
Can I do one more?
No, as many as you want, as many as you want.
Now, I think about retirement planning, and we probably all have some sort of retirement plan that we're contributing to or planning on.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that goes into making sure we're okay and secure for maybe 20 years
Right.
after our working lives.
Right.
Versus, I think Jesus' retirement plan would say, save up for the eternal, not for the 20 years that you're going to be living after you work. It's kind of like God's retirement plan, really.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, he's not saying don't.
oh, sure, I have a
You
retirement
got that.
myself.
Yeah,
it's,
you got to provide for your family.
uh-huh.
And at some point, you're going to get to the age, maybe health-wise, whatever, you can't, quote, work. And that's what our retirement plans are for, just to help with that.
In the Bible times, there was not a concept of retirement.
You work till you die.
And also, in most parts of the world, during the Bible times, Old Testament, all the way through, until just a few hundred years ago, there was no concept of not working on Sunday or not, only working 5 days a week. It was 7 days a week
Yeah.
there. And the Jews were mocked because they took 1 day off a week. In most of the world, people would talk about those lazy Jews.
Yeah.
And that was an actual thing. And so our concept of 5 days a week and working
40
down
hour a week.
Yeah, 40 hour, maybe 4 days a week or whatever. That's a new concept.
But we talked before in other classes and this is where that Sabbath day command came. Part of it was your physical body has to have a break. You can't work 7 days a week all day.
And
And
that's
right.
scientifically.
Your body needs a break.
Or you'll make him a break.
Yeah. So. Any other questions about concerning the first three verses altogether? So verses 4 through 6, we learn how the rich accumulated their wealth. Does the Bible discourage the acquiring of wealth? We've answered that a while ago. The answer is no. So what does the Bible condemn? Acquiring wealth by illegal means or for illegal purposes. Isaiah and Jeremiah exposed the selfishness of the rich and warned that judgment was coming. James gave 3 illustrations how the rich accumulated their wealth. In verse 4, the rich accumulated their wealth by holding back back wages. Sorry for the slip. Holding back wages. Laborers were hired and paid by the day and did not have any legal contracts with their employers. The parable of the laborers in Matthew 21 through 16, we see that. In the law, God gave definite instructions concerning the laboring man in order to protect him from the oppressive employer. They were to be paid each day before the sun sets. By fraudulent means, the rich men robbed the poor. They did not care about the suffering they inflicted on their employees. These rich men had hired the laborers and promised to pay them a specific amount. The men had completed their work but had not been paid. The tense of the word, the verb, and the word is failed to pay, kept back, or withheld, depends on your translation. In the original Greek, it indicates that the laborers never will get paid. So in verse 5, the rich accumulated their wealth because they lived in luxury. You have lived in high style on the earth, is the literal translation for verse 5. Luxury living is living a lavish lifestyle far higher than what is needed. It is indulging oneself in the lust of the flesh by buying everything possible to satisfy one's wants. All of us are grateful for the good things of life, and we would certainly not want to return to primitive conditions, but we recognize the fact that there is a point of diminishing returns. These men that James addressed were feeding themselves on their riches. Verse 5 says that the day of slaughter is coming, and the Greek picture there is cattle being slaughtered, taken to the slaughtering house, being fattened and then slaughtered. So if what we have has been earned lawfully and in the will of God, we must not waste it on selfish living. The rich man Jesus described in Luke 16:19 through 31 would have felt right at home with these rich men James wrote about. Any question about holding back wages or living in luxury? Another way the rich acquired their wealth is by controlling the courts. That's in verse 6. Often those who have wealth also have political power and can get what they want. So what is the modern day golden rule?
Do unto others before they do it to you.
Modern day, not the original.
Do you
Modern
have
day.
the gold has the rules? or
One
makes
has
the
the
rules?
gold, makes the rules. Sorry, Jim. Trick
Jim did
question.
quote the biblical.
Huh?
He didn't quote.
He said, do unto others before they do to you.
Oh. So when God established Israel and her land, he gave the people a system of courts. That's in Deuteronomy 17. He warned the judges not to be greedy, this is in Exodus 18, or to be partial, that's in Leviticus 19. Robbery was condemned, and I'll give you some examples there. The prophet Amos denounced the judges in his day who took bribes and fixed cases. The courts in James' day were apparently easy to control if you had enough money. The poor workers could not afford expensive lawsuits, so they were beaten down every time. The workers had just cause, but they were not given justice. Instead, they were abused and ruined. The poor man did not resist the rich man because he had no weapons with which to fight. All he could do was call on the Lord for justice. You look at verse.
The Lord in Deuteronomy 24 said that if you defrauded them, that was sin.
Yeah, it calls it sin. So if you look at verse 6, and different translations read it slightly different. NIV says, you have condemned and murdered the innocent one. The New American Standard says you have condemned and put to death the righteous person. Amplified says you have condemned and have put to death the righteous man. And New Living says you have condemned and killed innocent people. So were the rich literally killing and murdering the poor people in verse 6?
Not immediately.
Okay? You can take this figuratively or delayed literally. The rich man could oppress the poor in a way the poor would die. It is killing the righteous to preserve one's own way of life, possibly the result of overwork or other factors. The Bible warns us against the securing of wealth by illegal means. God owns all wealth, that's in Psalm 50, and permits us to be stewards of his wealth for his glory. We must put God first in our lives, and he will see to it that we always have all that we want.
Need.
Oh, thank you. That is correct. He gives us what we need, not what we want. Any questions on controlling the courts? Now, if I was in Montgomery, this is where I would throw out a couple of lawyer jokes, because in Montgomery, we have Jones School of Law connected to Faulkner University. So we have attorneys all over the churches in Montgomery. right?
You have attorneys all over the state of Alabama.
There's a bunch of them. So it was common for us to make attorney jokes at church, so they live with us, they still like this. Any questions about controlling the courts, or any comments about controlling the courts?
It is hard to be a defense attorney, I would think, not knowing which clients lie to you and are guilty.
You mean they lie? People lie? The back row back there is mighty quiet, but y'all have this look on your face.
I've never do anything like any of that stuff.
CPAs look at things differently than attorneys do, right?
We don't,
Numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
we don't have to give the poor today because the government does it for us and get the money to do it, so we're essentially giving it to the poor.
We're not good for it. If churches would do what we're supposed to do, government wouldn't have anything to do.
We wouldn't have government.
We wouldn't, we take care of it. You know,
We waited too long.
there wouldn't be a welfare system, so to speak. But that's a subject for another day. It is good to have the things that money can buy, provided you also have the things that money cannot buy. What good is a $500,000 house if there's no home, or $1 million diamond ring if there's no love? James did not condemn riches or rich people. He condemned the wrong use of riches and rich people who use their wealth as a weapon and not as a tool with which to build. It is bad enough to gain wealth in a sinful way, but to use that wealth in sinful ways just makes the sin greater. It is possible to be poor in this world and yet rich in the next world. The return of Jesus Christ will make some people poor and others rich, depending on the spiritual condition of their hearts. What we keep, we lose. What we give to God, we keep, and He adds interest. Any comments or questions?
You know, Lynn, back on page 2,
You have to tell me where you are, because I got
second paragraph on there, you said Abraham, Job, Solomon, and many others were wealthy, but they maintained their faith and character.
Right.
Not so sure about Solomon on that one. Abraham and Job, okay.
Yeah.
But Solomon,
Talking about with his 1,000 wives or what?
well, we don't, you know, the Bible kind of leaves us hanging on the end of his life.
Yeah.
You know, he was going down some bad roads there.
But he was the wisest man, right?
He was wise in some things, but he goes down some roads that,
But he set up altars,
Yeah.
idol altars, and
Yeah.
allowed idolatry into his nation, so we know that he can go against them. Because he married those wives.
That the wives is one who did it, right? We're blaming on the wives.
He's the one that actually had the power to do it. He did it for them.
that's all.
That's good. Anybody, anything else? All right, you're gonna get out a few minutes early. Next week, we'll cover verses 7 through 12. And remember what Gary talked about in last week's sermon? He referred to it today. Now remember?
Patience.
Patience. So next week, we talk about the power of patience.
Better watch out, man. You'll have a rough week. And teach on that.
I thought of that when you were talking about it.
Yeah, I'd have somebody else teach that.
Call in sick.
Same thing, I'm not gonna be there.
Yeah. Anyway, it is, it's what it, the phrase, it is what it is. Anyway, anybody have any final comments, questions?
It is hard sometimes. We are all super blessed, and it is hard sometimes to know whether to give to those that seem to waste it on things that aren't valuable, that maybe aren't valuable, and that or maybe that are only valuable to them.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to know whether or not you are giving to help them or you are enabling them to do what Solomon did, go down the wrong path.
Yeah, it is.
And that's very hard.
And you just have to pray for that wisdom and discernment to know when to do what, when.
You think that God will hold us accountable to enabling someone? I I mean, if we
If we do it
honestly don't
intentionally.
know we're doing that,
Yeah.
would
No.
that be a sin?
I don't think he'll hold it. If we do it intentionally, yes. But if we don't do it intentionally to enable them, if we think that we're doing it to bless them, from what we understand, I mean, what is it that, let God sort it out in the wash? You know, I think that some of that stuff's above our,
Hey, great.
Pay grade.
well, above our pay grade, above our understanding, above our knowledge base.
I think, there's no simple answers to these questions, but a lot of it's based on intent. And I think just the question you asked, you can turn around the other way, would we be held accountable for using it as an excuse not to be generous?
Not to be generous, yeah.
And especially when it hits home, you got a family member who, they're struggling. I mean, you know they're struggling, but you also know why they're struggling. And it's not always good that put them there.
It's painful.
It is, you don't,
But sometimes you have to have that tough love.
yeah.
And like you say, if you know they're struggling, there are situations where you step in. Or if it's something that you see that they are doing that they shouldn't be doing,
Yeah.
and they're asking you to help them with it, no.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think that's why charity is usually most effective when it's done at the local level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know more.
Yeah, you know more of what's going on.
Better discernment.
I would, I was gonna say real quick, I've always said, I do not want to be on the benevolence committee. Because that would be hard for me to know the difference. And I'm afraid I would be too negative at times when I should be helping. So, Marie?
Well, in the Bible, you think of all the people Jesus healed, and we don't know what happened with them later.
Yeah.
I mean, that was Jesus giving to them of his wealth,
Yeah.
and that maybe many of them
They probably
never turned to him,
Exactly.
never followed him later,
Yeah.
but it was, again, it's our own, our own heart that we look at, and we just try to do the best, but yeah, but
A lot of those
it's
people,
better to be too generous than the
Yeah.
other way around, and for some
Yeah.
of us, that's hard, because our tendency, I thought about myself, our
But,
tendency is not to be too
yeah,
generous.
but let me throw this out, and this is one of Ramsey's philosophies is, if it's gonna hurt you financially to help them, don't do it. You gotta take care of you and your immediate family first.
But is it hurting me on what I use to buy groceries next week?
Yeah.
Or is it hurting me on what I use to buy the vacation?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, I mean, so that's
Or the
different.
super fancy clothes.
Yeah.
Wayne?
yeah, a lot of those people that Jesus healed could have just been, sick from eating too many donuts or something.
So,
The lady with the blood disease, we don't know what happened to her, do we?
Yeah.
Right, we don't know with any of them, really.
one thing you really have to keep in mind is as you're helping someone, it may or may not be about that person. It may be about the other person watching this behavior. And I can say that because I've heard the comments, this medical clinic has never converted any patients to come to this church.
I think we've had
But-
one.
That's not true.
Yeah, I know that's not completely true. It's been said, but I know it's not true.
Yeah, we've
Because
had a few.
few.
We've had a few.
But anyway, the funny thing is, Jennifer and I are here because of that medical clinic. We never were patients, but we are here because we saw this congregation love the community enough to do this. And so that was the first reason. There's 3 reasons why Jennifer and I were here, and the first reason was that right there. Second reason is
I've
that
had a
man
visit-
sitting right over there.
I've had a visitor tell me that too.
Yeah.
That they were so blessed by just, the whole medical sign was over here at the time. They
Yeah.
went to- And they said, I'm so blessed to know that you were working in cooperation with other churches and that you're reaching out to your community. And she said that is just something that we don't do enough of.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, this is the first time I have seen a Church of Christ. And I've been in a lot of them. My dad was a
He was a
preacher.
PK.
I was a PK, but I have
Bernard was a PK.
never seen this in a Church of Christ. I've seen it in other churches. I've never seen it physically in a Church of Christ. That was just so overwhelmingly exciting to me. I can just say straight up. So it's not always about the person you're immediately helping. That's the whole point.
Exactly.
Bernard?
We were supposed to have guests today, and one of the things that she said to me when we were talking to her last week, she said it twice. She said, "I've never seen the church do that thing." I was talking to them about it. And she would say, "That's one of the reasons why I want to come." I'm thinking something went wrong with them not coming today. But she said it twice. She came after we had talked about it. She kind of thought about it and said, "I've never seen the church do that." But yes, that has a great impact on the community. And it's
Okay.
good.
All righty, thank you for your comments, and have a blessed week. We'll see you next week, hopefully. Unless I pass the lesson on to
And somebody else about that.